Welcome to the debate. Our source material today, it really lays out quite a profound philosophical challenge. This idea of universal flux, the paradox of change. I mean, if we accept the premise that everything changes, well, then that statement itself seems like an unchanging truth. So it forces us to ask, where exactly does the stable reference point, this anchor of permanence, where does it actually reside? And this is pretty critical for building any coherent architecture of meaning.
Right, and the central question we really need to tackle is where that fundamental anchor is located. Is it, internal, rooted within the self-reflective consciousness that interprets reality? Or is it maybe external, grounded in the objective physical reality that simply must exist before any thought is even possible?
And I'll be focusing on the conscious self as that necessary, enduring witness.
And I'll argue for the priority of, ontological existence and the kind of constancy we find within scientific laws as the truly stable ground.
Okay, so to begin, the very concept of change, it only really gains coherence when you contrast it with something that fundamentally endures. Now, I appreciate the focus on external structures, I do, but I argue the philosophical anchor must be the self-reflective consciousness. Descartes was key here, wasn't he? The cogito. It shifts the locus of permanence inward. The stability isn't in the, let's say, the transient content of reality, but in the capacity for awareness itself, the enduring act of witnessing. It's this stable self that maintains identity, navigating that recursive loop between a world in constant flux and the mind trying to make sense of it.
That's a compelling case for internal coherence. Sure. But I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, really asserting that being precedes thought. If we look at the source material's own conceptual chain, existence needs time, space, and matter, comprehension is clearly presented as a consequence, something mediated by the brain. I'm sorry, but I just don't quite buy that thought can anchor existence itself. Maybe we should consider the inversion. I am, therefore I think. The true anchor, the constant totality that sort of underlies all this change, it's found, I believe, in scientific constancy, like the principle of conservation. Nothing is created, nothing is lost, everything merely transforms. That conserved totality, that's the objective permanence we're looking for.
Okay, but if we accept the text's assertion that existence requires comprehension to even gain meaning, then interpretation isn't just passive reception, is it? It's an active, stabilizing force. The mind imposes categories, like Kant's ideas, time, space, causality, onto the raw flow of existence. So therefore, existence as we experience it, as we know it, becomes a relational construct fundamentally defined by the mind. The structure is provided internally, allowing us to build coherent narratives out of all that flux. Doesn't that necessarily make the interpreter the true anchor?
But doesn't that fundamentally ignore the sheer vastness of material reality that functions perfectly well without conscious interpretation? The ontological ground must precede the interpretive act. I mean, the text itself explicitly notes that organisms, plants, animals, they exist, they live, they persist without conceptual reasoning. So if consciousness is merely an emergent property, perhaps dependent on the material stage, mass, matter, the laws governing them, how can it possibly claim to be the anchor? We're debating the fundamental anchor here, and matter, governed by scientific constancy, it really sets the stage for everything else.
But the challenge posed by the paradox of change is, I think, fundamentally philosophical, not purely physical. Now, you might ask, if the mind itself is transient, just a collection of changing memories, perceptions, how can the witness truly be stable? And my answer is, it's stable because the capacity for awareness itself, that's the necessary condition for even identifying change in the first place. That capacity, that potential for awareness, that is what remains constant, even as the contents of the mind just rush by.
See, here's where I think we really diverge on solving the paradox. I would argue the scientific anchor provides a resolution that is objective and external. If the total energy in the universe is conserved, right, a constant sum, then the claim everything changes is, philosophically speaking, resolved. There's a continuous, unchanging numerical truth beneath the surface of all that transformation. That seems like a verifiable, objective permanence to me.
I see the appeal of that objectivity, but while scientific conservation describes the mechanism and, let's say, the boundaries of that flow, it doesn't fully address the human and philosophical need for an enduring self-reference point. Conservation laws describe the transformation. Yes, absolutely. But it is the act of contemplating this immense objective flow, that capacity for self-reflective awareness, that truly meets the deep universal need for an enduring ground. A need identified across spiritual, scientific, and philosophical traditions. Permanence isn't just a physical fact out there. It's also a necessity for meaning in here.
So ultimately, we are left weighing the stability we find in the external, objective, and scientifically constant physical reality against the stability found in the internal capacity for self-reflection. My focus remains on the ground that is verifiable, the ground that precedes the observer.
And I maintain that while reality certainly provides the stage, the most fundamental anchor for meaning, and indeed the necessary ground against the paradox of change, is the self-reflective consciousness that actively interprets and, in a sense, stabilizes that reality. I mean, all the frameworks explored in the material, from divine constancy to physical laws, they all demonstrate this universal need for an enduring ground against the flux.
Yeah, and the debate really leaves the listener to contemplate whether permanence is, at its core, a fact of nature, or perhaps a deep necessity of the mind itself.